Greetings, friends, and mostly enemies. Today, World Building 104, Biosphere. So, this video might be a little bit different than the rest of the videos in this series, and that's because, really, this is more of a biology lecture than anything else. If you don't understand how biology works in the real world, and why things are the way they are biologically speaking, then you can't write good biology. And of course, if you're a fantasy writer, it's not that big of a deal because you have magic at your disposal. You can literally write any absurd living thing and say, well, it's magical, and that explains it. But if you write sci-fi, then you need to be a little bit more grounded in what is, realistic. So, let's have a talk about biology and how to write believable biology. Let's take an example. If you follow my channel, you know I love teaching through examples. Let's look at the dog. Okay. Dog is a great example because it has a lot of traits that it evolved naturally, and it has a lot of traits that have been bred into it by selective breeding from humans, especially when you start looking at specific breeds. We can learn a lot about biology by studying dogs. Let's start by taking a single trait and look at the evolutionary reasons that it developed that little bit of biology. Let's look at its ever-growing claws. Unlike cats, dogs have claws that are alive. Their claw actually goes all the way into their joint, connects to their bone, has blood flow. That's why if you clip your dog's nails too far back, it hurts them. Dogs have living claws. And the reason they have that, well, there's a few reasons. One, they offer better traction when running. So, in the rough terrain of the northern Europeans and the wilds of Africa and the wilds of North America, those claws offer really good traction when they're running, which obviously helps them chase down prey. Another advantage to having those ever-growing claws is that they're ever-growing. You're never going to run out of claw. So if your claws snap off when you're running or hunting, don't worry about it. They're going to grow back. Another great thing about living claws is that they are great for digging. They're slightly blunted, so they can take a real pounding, but they're still pointed enough to get into the dirt. And of course, wolves and other canines burrow when they're having litters of pups to protect their pups from other animals and the weather and what have you. So we see that because of their environment and because of their lifestyle, they evolved a trait that specifically caters to allowing them to perform the functions of their lives. That's the general gist of how evolutionary biology works, and you can apply it to almost any example. Now, you might stumble into an animal with a weird trait that really has no obvious function, and you'll say, well, what happened here? And a lot of people who don't believe in evolution use stuff like that as fuel for dissenting opinion to say evolutionary science is bunk. And here's the thing about that. Evolution has missteps sometimes. Evolution happens through random genetic mutation. The good ones get selected for and become permanent part of the species. The bad ones typically die off, and the ones that are just kind of like, what the fuck, they might stay and they might go. Kind of a toss-up with those ones. The reason this is relevant is because when you're designing your creature and giving it traits, and giving it features, you need to look at everything you're giving it, and you need to look at every aspect of the animal from its behavior to its physiology, and say to yourself, is this something that it would evolve and keep? Is this something that would randomly occur? Is this something that would randomly occur via mutation and then be selected for? If you give your animal some absurd feature, like, I don't know, blood that's so acidic that it can eat through every material known to man. Looking at you, James. Then you're gonna have a really kick-ass story or a good explanation for why your animal has that trait, because nowhere else in nature do we see animals with blood that's very acidic at all, let alone so acidic that it will go through the best man-made materials humanity has to offer. It just doesn't exist in nature. And for good reason, because blood that acidic, it'd be impossible to have a living creature. Mucus doesn't come that thick. You could never have an animal with blood or any other internal fluids that acidic. There's just no organic material that could house that acid. Obnoxious bit of writing, if you ask me. So, be careful when you're giving your animals very absurd features like that. On the flip side, you can give your animal as many adaptive traits as you want, especially if you're trying to play this animal up to be an apex animal at the top of its food chain, whether it's an herbivore or a predator. If it's supposed to be near the top of its food chain, make it as badass as you want. Just make sure the adaptations make sense for the environment and lifestyle that it has. And of course, your animal can have a few vestigial traits. Your animal can have traits that don't quite make sense on their face, or even traits that seem like they're counterproductive, because we do see those things in nature. But be careful with them, okay? Nature has those missteps, and when people look at those animals, they go, what the hell? If they see your animal, and your animal has them, and there isn't a good explanation, they're gonna double what the hell. Why would you write that? So, if you're kind of skeptical on whether or not you can get away with doing a particular thing to your animal, or plant for that matter, Google the trait, Google your idea, and see if it exists in nature. And if it does exist in nature, or if something close to it exists in nature, go for it. Again, we just want to avoid the super absurd traits like blood that will go clean through any material you can pick. Now you notice I used the xenomorph example twice, and here's why I want to talk a little bit more about that. So, the xenomorph acidic blood trait is absurd on its face, and here's why. Even if it's a genetically engineered monster, even if a race of super advanced aliens is guilty of creating it, it's still alive. By all canon, the xenomorph aliens, they are indeed alive. And so, they have to be made out of at least partially organic material. And that means that their body is at least partially organic. And again, that means that there's nothing that's going to stand up to that crazy acid. Now, that's obviously relevant for sci-fi writers because it teaches us a lesson. Even if we come up with something really cool, a superpower, for example, and we want to give it to one of our characters, we really need to ask ourselves, is this something that an organic living thing can do? Is this something that is within the realm of possibility for a living organism to do? And of course, you can stretch science fiction quite a bit. You can stretch suspension of disbelief, but there's a limit. And for me, the acidic blood has always been one of those things, no matter how awesome the movies are, no matter how much I like some of the movies I've seen in that franchise, I never get over the acidic blood being absolutely stupid as hell. It just makes no damn sense. If they evolved in nature, they wouldn't have that because, honestly, as a defense mechanism, acidic blood is pretty shitty. By then you're already injured. And if you were designing a super predator to go forth and exterminate worlds, again, why would you give it acidic blood? As a defense mechanism, it's pretty shitty. If I was designing a super killer, I'd probably opt for, I don't know, an armored exoskeleton, hyper reflexes, super senses, and agility as my go-to defensive strategies. Or, you know, good old-fashioned stealth. Literally anything other than, oh yeah, and when they bleed on you, it fucking kills you. The point of your super predator is to kill them. Not your super predator shouldn't bleed. we only have so much suspension of disbelief. You only get a certain ration of that at the start of your story, okay? And if you use it all up on stupid shit like acidic blood, you're not going to have any when you need it. So, write more believable animals. Use that suspension of disbelief where you need it. And while it's true that if your story is really good and your characters are really good and your writing is good, you can buy more suspension of disbelief from your reader through how awesome your story is, that's not a guaranteed strategy. Because there's always readers that are just looking to pick holes in your story. They just want to find something to pick at. And it's only going to be people who like your story and characters who are going to offer up the suspension of disbelief you need to cover your ass on shit like super acidic blood. So, save your ration for something good. And that applies to everything in your book, not just the Biosphere. You just need to apply that good old logic filter and common sense filter to all your world building. The Biosphere is no exception. I don't even feel a need to give you a numbered list on this one, a numbered checklist, because it's really fucking simple, guys. Design your animal. Don't give it absurd traits that no living organism could possibly have. See if there's anything comparable in nature. If there is, you're good to go. And if you do want to go outside the wheelhouse of nature, at least stay grounded in what's physically and chemically possible. That's the vid, guys. That's the whole shooting match. This one was on the shorter side because, again, frankly, this is high school biology stuff. If you passed high school biology, you should be able to write believable animals in your fictional setting. It's not that hard. I don't feel the need to beat it for a 20-30 minute video. Now, my parting advice and gift to you. Again, do your research. And if you're the kind of person who doesn't like traditional research, it bores you to tears, you can't watch a documentary without falling asleep, you can't read a Wikipedia article because you can't focus on it, I'm going to link 2 channels down in the description that make content around animals. And one is in a very humorous format, one is in a very entertaining format. It's Z Frank and Tier Zoo. And they make videos about wildlife and their adaptations and what they're good at. And as a final parting note, if you haven't checked me out on other social media yet, you should. We're in the age of cancel culture and censorship, and it's only a matter of time before I say something that the wrong media exec doesn't like or big tech exec doesn't like, and they boot me off this platform. Because as I've made no secret of, I'm not PC, and when the woke mob comes for me, it'll be a big middle finger instead of any sort of capitulation or apology. So, if you want to stay in touch with me even when that happens, check me out on Odyssey, check me out on Parler and Minds, and I just made a TikTok too, where you can go if you want anything that's, slice of life from me. Until next time, guys. Peace.